Good afternoon, everyone, and first and foremost, thank you for coming today. My name is Anthony Boddy. I'm the Director of the Department of Regional New South Wales within the New South Wales Government. The first person I'd like to bring to the lectern today is Rasmus Frisk, who is the CEO of Archilab. We've worked with Archilab since early this year, so I welcome Raz to come and talk through the document as the first part of the handover event today. Welcome, Raz.
Right, I'm going to talk you through the activation plans that we've been working on together with the Shoalhaven City Council and the NRAT over the last 6 months, like Anthony was talking about. Just break it down a bit in the time stages. So we started working already and talking about it in the start of, well, the council did a workshop back in the end of 2022, but we started in February with the initial data collection and then workshops, processing, and then feedbacks. And some of you guys that are here today probably also been part of some of those events. And then finally here in August, we're doing a presentation of where we are now. The action plan actually consists of 60 pages, but of course I'm just only going to show you 32. All 60 is of course in the booklet, so there's nothing hidden here, but I'm trying to make it sweet, short and sharp. The consultant process, and this is a bit of numbers, most of you guys have been part or been aware of these events. There was an online survey starting off simply for us figuring out what is it actually people are asking for, or get us prepared, dress us up in some sort of way. And we also did a couple of landowner interviews. And that led up to the kickoff event that was connected to the bridge walk. And some of you guys remember the story we had there. There was a lot of people present that day, which was great. And a lot of people decided to stop by and give our inputs. And we got over 300 inputs, which is pretty much when we talk about engagement. Not just that, but we're simply also harvesting the do's and don'ts. So getting a base to start off with was important for us. The next part was actually mapping ambassadors. So we looked out into the community and different stakeholders and invited them in to be part of this workshop. And those ambassadors, as we call them, was well connected into the community, and it was a way for us to create gateways out into the community because we probably couldn't talk with everybody. So in this way they could bring forward some of the concerns or some of the ideas that was done on that workshop day. Of course, the kickoff event and all the inputs that came from that was the basis for this workshop. Also super important, the feedback loop. So we took all those inputs and we crunched them and we put pen and paper. And then we came back with a drawing. So the engagement part and the process that I went through led up to us creating 12 strategy and design principles. So one of the 12 was about turning the grid towards the water. So again, it was a question about that Nowra being built up from the inland and out, and embracing the water was also a way of going more perpendicular with the new grid system to the water. So you had a direct access from the city to the water. We need to make sure that it was easy to get around, both as pedestrians, also as on bike, but also in car and also in public transport. And most of you guys probably noticed on this is that we removed one of the larger roads going along the waterfront, and that's very intentional. We didn't want to celebrate the waterfront with parking. We of course acknowledge there needs to be parking, but we just want to put parking in a different spot. We still want to make sure that it's accessible to get to the waterfront by car, so it's not trying to limit anybody to get to the waterfront. But that was one of the major things, is actually figuring out how can we change the road network. A soft riverfront boardwalk, an important part. A lot of people have been asking for this. An active and engaging riverfront. The next part is about creating a human scale road hierarchy. So again, looking at our dimensions for the road, trying to be focusing on can we create different width and different functions. Some of them would have on-street parking, some won't have on-street parking. Some would mainly just be for pedestrians and bikes. Some would have more commercial activities and so forth attached. Preserve and add nature, not just preserve all the nature and the great green space that's already there, but actually also continue adding new green space so it becomes a destination also for parks and recreation. Buildings on the high ground, and that's a crucial one. And I mentioned that report, the flood study, and a lot of concerns has been raised later on in the process about where can we build and where can we build. And right now the flood study shows that this is where we can build. So it's also important that we, in the design, shows that these are the high grounds. And of course, one would say, well, if I want to build on this side over here, why can't we just pour some soil on there and then I can build there too? But the water will find its way, and then eventually will find its way to your neighbor. So that's why the flood study is important, and we have to align with that. Respect the existing landscape and site history. Then there's this one, courtyard housing topology. It's about maximizing the green space, but also thinking in a new way of how to develop so it doesn't become giant footprints with fences around. But it creates semi-private, semi-public areas, but lots of green space in between. An active ground floor, being very specific about what ground floors we should activate, because it's too easy to say that we can pop in cafes all the way around. It's not going to work. They're not going to survive. But where can we put them so they will strengthen up certain roads and certain areas and be part of the community? A city for people, not for cars. That's of course crucial. We want to work with the human scale. So some of you guys, when you look at the plan, you're saying, well, what about all these weird looking shaped buildings? These are just, they're not set in stone that this is not how it's going to look, but it's trying to indicate that we want a variety of different typologies of housing. So we want big, we want small, we want crooked roofs. That gives that, and we of course want something that's not, that relates to the human body. But there is a mix, so we can please both the 2-floor and the 8-floor buildings. And that brings us to the activation plan. And this is of course the concept drawing, and I keep saying this again and again. Before we can move on, we need to put pen on paper, and that's what we've done. And we've been putting pen on paper on all the things that we heard, and that brings us to this drawing. So that brings us to the strategic actions. We have 12 of them too. They got a couple of following topics. There's public transport and parking, designing with country, life on the river, housing in neighborhoods, parks and green space, and public space and commercial life. But again, here there is a lot more why. There is a lot more text in depth about how these action points came alive. Minimizing empty fortified space. This is a lot about the parking. One of the things that came up again and again and again, I'm saying this is not as a nagging thing, but as something that we really want to focus on. How do we work with parking? And how do we don't allow parking to dictate us, but how do we work with parking in a smart way? Adding cultural appropriate elements. I talked about the boardwalk, implementing of the river pools and the sandbank, designing a park around Graham Lodge, providing cultural appropriate signage and highlights nature. And then this thing that was really significant for a lot of people, getting close to the water. Right now, the water is maybe just 5 meters away, but you don't feel that you're walking next to it. There's a lot of scrubs and barriers to the water. So this whole idea about how can we create that river boardwalk that makes us want to walk along the river. Build to create human scale and diverse housing. This is an important one. We have to be open-minded about how we create our new developments down there. So it's not only dictated by the investor, but how can we actually create a community that is something that we feel we want to walk around in. And then connecting green space across the precinct. This is the part about adding more green and creating green connections in the area. Of course, preserve existing green space as much as possible. Activating the public space in the precinct. Create public space, each with their own unique use and function. Festival square next to the river. There was a lot of people that really wanted to have an opportunity for markets next to the river. And then the public wharf, sailboats, cafes, restaurants, right at the riverbank.
Thank you, Rasmus. One of the interesting parts of the Nowra Riverfront Advisory Task Force is that we do actually have sitting on our task force the Mayor.
Thanks, AB. Thanks to my colleagues that are in the room. I'm not going to say a few words, I'm going to say a few more than a few words, because this has been quite a long journey. But I want to go back to the beginning of where we started this afternoon, and that was when Uncle Paul was talking about the river and the creatures within the river and the connection to our Aboriginal people, and how important the Yarrabingan story has been to connect with our local Aboriginal people to make sure that this project does not stand alone and creates the pimple on a pumpkin kind of effect with what's going on at Shoalhaven Hospital. As was also recognised at the beginning of the discussion, we've got a major infrastructure project to the east, but we've also got one to the west. And I think that bringing that together in a harmonious way is something that we really must strive to do as a collective and as a city. I've really enjoyed the time that I've been able to be present on the Nowra Riverfront Task Force, and I've enjoyed it because I've learnt a lot. And I really want to pay my respects to the staff of Shoalhaven City Council, because they've worked extraordinarily hard to get to the point where we are today, along with all of the other, the different groups that have come on, the different contractors who have gone on. And I think, Raz, that the experience of working with you too has been fantastic, because the Archilab project and process has been something that hasn't really been done before in the Shoalhaven, and to be part of that on the bridge on the night of the opening was really effervescent and quite exciting. And when we had that original conversation about how do we do the process and how do we reach the most amount of people, it was like AB talked a lot about this piece of work and that piece of work. Well, all of the pieces coming together of a great big puzzle. And I know that this is just another piece of a greater puzzle, but those connections to community that evening were tremendous, because I think that was the first time that the average the average person in Nowra walking the main street, walking on the bridge, had actually connected with something that can be and has the potential to be so massive and a game changer for this city. What makes me really happy about this, because I think that within the next, and I'm going to be really super optimistic, within the next few years that we have got an opportunity to actually make things happen on the ground. And it is going to take money, and it's going to need to take that money and that financial support from our federal friends and, of course, from our state government friends. Because when we look at that, I'm just going to go off-piste as well. Council owns that big chunk of land straight down the middle. Over on this side, we've got a great big chunk of land that's owned by the state government. And then straight to the west, we've got a $500 million hospital that's about to be built. And what's been very clear to this community over the last decade, and particularly in the last few years, is the desperate need for affordable housing for our hospital workers and for our key workers. And with the state government owning that piece of land, or a good majority of that land so close to the hospital, it is really exciting to think that with the state government investing the right amount, putting the right amount of investment, putting the right people, that we can actually see a project there that will inspire the private sector to look at the rest of their holdings across the whole of that riverfront side. And it's really important, I think, that when you go through that document, when we've been through the slides today, what is really important is to get high quality outdoor space. Because we know that our lives are changing, right? We know that our kids, our young people, they're not going to be living in a 4-bedroom home with a double garage and a 1/4-acre block anywhere because they simply can't afford it. They'll be bringing up children in apartment blocks, as they do all across Europe, and nobody's having any problems there. They're all going pretty well in your country, aren't they, Raz? Yeah, but we need to have the high quality outdoor space so that when we leave the places that we call home, that we have an outdoor collective home where we can gather as community and create community. I really think that, the other thing that was really great was the idea of working with nature, making sure that we work with nature to get good outcomes, because when we fight against nature, that's when we get the absolute worst, and that's why we've seen such a pushback from agencies around building within floodplains and flood zones. So I think that the opportunities exist, and the opportunities exist with the state government investing with the help of the federal government through those housing funds into this area to make sure that we have a showcase that allows for our nurses, for the people who serve you coffee, to have fantastic homes close to their workspace so that they can live a wonderful life in this city and inspire the private investment that needs to happen in the future. Thank you.